Good afternoon, and welcome to the Assembly of Osteopathic Graduate Medical Educators webinar series. We are pleased to have you join us for this graduate level osteopathic training series webinar on overcoming the challenges of applying and achieving osteopathic recognition. My name is Dr. Carrie Jordan. I am a member of the AOGME Education Committee, and I will help facilitate this webinar today. Before we get started, I would like to review a few housekeeping notes that you can find on the slide as well. Just know this webinar is being recorded. The recording will be posted on the AOGME webpage within 7 days. All webinar participants are in listen-only mode. If you experience technical issues during the webinar, please use the chat feature and we will assist you. If you have questions for the panelists during the webinar, please feel free to submit them through the Q&A feature at any time. If time permits, at the end of the webinar, they will respond to your questions. I am also excited to announce that osteopathic physicians can earn up to 1 credit hour of AOA 1A CME credit for attending this webinar today. Why it's happening live. To obtain AOA CME credit, you must complete the post-webinar evaluation survey and also submit the CME attestation form to AOGME at AACOM for acom.org. The link is downloaded. The link to download the CME form will be posted into the chat here for you. I will now briefly introduce our panelists. And I will just apologize ahead of time if I mess up their names. So we've kind of went over this. So first we have Dr. Dan Krychek. He is the Osteopathic Curriculum Director and the Management of Healthcare Systems Co-Director at the Cleveland Clinic Family Medicine Residency. Then we have Dr. Corey Beverly Waters. She's the Director of Osteopathic Education and Medical Director for the OMMM at Cleveland Clinic South Point. And we have Dr. Beth Vitucci, and I probably mess up. She's the Director of Osteopathic Education at St. Mary Medical Center in Langhorne, Pennsylvania. And finally, and hopefully he'll be able to join us shortly, he's busy in clinic today, Dr. Gabe Lerman. He is the Program Director and Director of Osteopathic Education at Mercy Catholic Medical Center, Transitional Year Residency. Thank you to our panelists for joining us today and sharing your expertise. With that, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Well, hi, everybody. Thank you all for joining us today here. I think one of the first things we wanted to talk about here was why we think osteopathic recognition is so important. And so we're excited to talk about that, as obviously all of us panelists are very passionate about that. So to kick us off, I think it's an amazing recruitment tool. We have lots and lots of applicants who come through and are asking about osteopathic recognition. Obviously, it's a huge draw with a lot of the growing number of osteopathic medical students. And secondly, I think it really sets a high, it sets a standard so that your residents feel comfortable going out and doing OMM. And so a lot of my graduates who have recently finished a program here at the Cleveland Clinic signed on and are staying on in other practices, and they're able to negotiate time for OMM in their schedules, so it's protected. And I'm really jealous, and I think it's great that they get to, they were put through the training, and then they get to be, forward thinking about that. So it really sets them up for success. And that's why I think it's just such a great thing. I'll pass it off to one of the other two now for what their thoughts are there.
Sure. I think one of the main purposes and reasons I wanted to join this webinar was to take the opportunity to try to assist other programs with osteopathic recognition, because it can seem like it's a major hurdle to achieve osteopathic recognition. So we want to offer 2 tips for you. My first tip in general is don't be afraid to fail. With that, what I mean is, even if you feel like your application isn't very strong, it doesn't affect your program's accreditation status. It is completely separate. So then there's no implication either way for osteopathic recognition on your program's accreditation. So don't feel like there's a link between there, and don't let that hold you back from applying for osteopathic recognition. I recently just presented at the ACGME conference actually about our own program's fails along the way and citations and how to kind of work through that process. And I think as many of us are type A personalities or perfectionists in a lot of ways, taking the citations or areas for improvement, not personally, but using those for areas for growth or areas for continuous improvement, really kind of shifts your mindset when you do receive that feedback from the ACGME that may seem really nitpicky. And I would say just prepare yourself for that kind of feedback. Then I would say that my second tip would be, kind of well, how do I, incorporate this in my program? My program's already very busy. Our faculty feels like they're already stretched to the max. And I would say out of all of the ACGME requirements, the one that has the most leniency is actually how you can fit in OPP and OMT education in your program. So there's no specific requirements that say you need to have this number of didactics or this amount of experience. So you can really use your faculty's strengths. And just FYI, in order to apply, you only need the DOE and one osteopathic faculty. You just need 2 of you in your program. So it doesn't need to be a large number of DOs in order to make this happen. I at South Point actually have 4 osteopathic recognized programs, and I'm a DOE for each of those. So it is possible to be a DOE for more than one program and oversee that. And I can definitely talk to you about that further if you have any interest.
So I'll go next with why I think OR is important, why we started it at our organization, and our top 2 tips. So at my prior institution in 2015, we had been an AOA only program, and we had to apply to the ACGME. And because we had come from an AOA only program, and our hospital had been actually, it was called, it started off as Riverview Osteopathic Hospital. So we were an osteopathic hospital. It was really important for us to continue that legacy, continue that education, and help grow wonderful osteopathic physicians. So we applied for OR for our programs, which were IM, TY, and FM, and we got osteopathic rec for all of those programs. And in 2015, when I started the process, I was like, oh my gosh, kind of like Dr. Beverly Waters was saying, I want to help other people, because at the start of it, I wasn't sure where to go. I felt like we've always been teaching osteopathic education, so now I have to put the pen to paper and prove it. Since then, I've now joined St. Mary Medical Center, and I'm the director of osteopathic education for our internal med and family med program. We applied just this past cycle and we got it, and it was a lot, I don't want to say easier, but easier. And I felt a lot more calm in the process because I had gone through it. And so hopefully everybody on the webinar today will get some tips so they can go in feeling more calm and confident in getting their osteopathic recognition. My top 2 tips that I would say for doing OR in terms of the application process, when you go onto the ACGME's osteopathic rec website, if you look at their FAQs, that can be a great resource. They actually list some specific language that they want to see in some of the documentation, and it's right there for you. So utilize that. It's very helpful. And number 2, I would say collaborate with other residency programs in the area. We've done that with other programs. So we have our osteopathic grand rounds with other programs, and so it becomes great scholarly activity. We also offer, by partnering with PCOM, we offer 1A credits, which is very helpful for getting faculty to come as well. So I'll tie in that. So there's 3 tips. So see if you can offer CME to get faculty participation, and then collaborate together, because then you have scholarly activity and it takes off some of the burden from you because you're working with other people. So it spreads the love, spreads the wealth.
And Dr. Gabe Lerman, thank you for joining us. Just wanted to pose this question to you in case you missed it. What would be some top tips for getting started with applying for osteopathic recognition?
So, thanks for having me. Sorry, it was a bit late. I was having some technical malfunctions. One of the tips of getting started is realize that a lot of organizations, can you hear me? Okay. That a lot of organizations, such as the ACOFP and the ACOI, have documentation already kind of made. So don't try to reinvent the wheel. It's not necessary. So as was mentioning before, the ACGME has very specific wording that they want. It's in the FAQs, just copy paste, but they also have a lot of requirements, specifically with regards to evaluations, with scholarly activity evaluations, summative evaluations, formative evaluations. And so, you're gonna have a lot to do. So if it's already done for you, these organizations have it there. There's no reason not to use it. Just tailor it to your organization. That's what it's there for. And it also helps creates uniformity. In addition, I think it's very important, especially with the ACGME. Allowing a lot of leeway in the incorporation of osteopathic principles in practice in OMT, I think it's important that you take into account, and I did mention this in my two tips, that you don't want the DOs to feel like they're being punished with extra work because they're DOs. It's already bad enough that a lot of them feel they have to take 2 board exams, and now they're going into residency, and especially if you have a mix of MDs and DOs, that their MDs don't have to do any these things, but then you as a DO have to I have to do this extra OMT. I have to do this extra documentation. I have to do this extra scholarly activity. You really don't want to do that, because that's going to affect their well-being. And then when students come to interview, and the residents talk amongst themselves, you're not going to get a good PR per se. And they're not going to want to do OMT because they find it to be a burden. And so, learning how to incorporate it, and, if there's time, I can actually, my program is always evolving, how we're doing our osteopathic education. We're down at Mercy Catholic Medical Center down in, right outside of Philadelphia. We've been training DOs for almost 50 years. We've had 2 parallel IM programs, and then before the merger, we applied and achieved osteopathic recognition for the TY and the internal medicine program. So now it's just a matter of keeping up with all the new FAQs and wording that we need to do.
Well, thank you, panelists. I want to back up just a little bit and ask each of you, what do you see as one benefit or value, in addition to what you've already shared, that osteopathic recognition brings to your program?
Yeah, I think kind of dovetailing on what Dr. Lerman had to say, I think finding a way to make it a attractive piece of your program. So how can you integrate it so seamlessly that it seems like it's a part of a patient care, their residents' education, rather than seeming like an additional requirement?
So, one thing, I like to let my residents know is, you paid an incredible amount of money for this education. You spend all that time in the lab, learning these techniques. And if you actually look at data, I think they said less than 3% of DOs actually practice OMT. And a lot of it, because during either they never wanted to in the first place, but during residency they never really had the opportunity to incorporate it. A lot of students have said, well, yeah, I learned how to do it, but all I only used it on my friends who are all pretty healthy, right? You put them in a room with someone who's on a ventilator and show them how to do muscle energy on ribs, and a couple of days later the patient's extubated. Is that serendipity, or is that because we did something? And that kind of starts things rolling. And they actually, we've done this several times. The residents really start to get excited seeing that, hey, I did this with my hands. The patient, got better, and I really helped. It wasn't medications. And showing them, the importance of osteopathic principles of utilizing, the whole patient approach. That way, especially these days when families have access through my chart, especially if you use Epic or any other EMR that allows them to look at their to the notes. They'll see things like, well, the patient's non-compliant. They're like, well, that's the furthest from the truth. I just can't afford it. And that actually comes up if you ask what's going on at home. And that actually translates to good medicine. So I think that by showing them this, they really start to get excited.
And also, in addition to, recruiting DO candidates, we've actually found that our osteopathic recognition has helped us recruit MD candidates to our program, because we're a mixed program and our residency didactics include OMM. And so our DOs get all taken their skills to the next level, but then we advertise that our MDs can learn some really basic techniques. And that's really exciting for them. I think they see that as a unique opportunity that they can have in our program compared to other ones. And it's really helped us recruit some top-notch candidates. And so when it comes to recruiting both DOs and MDs, I think it's just an awesome selling point.
Yeah, I'd say
Anything
to
else?
your point, Dan, just for programs that are looking to maybe apply for osteopathic recognition, the ACGME views these slots as designated osteopathic residents. Those can be MDs or those can be DOs. And within your program, you can set up the criteria for entering those slots. The average that you need is just one resident per year. So all of your slots do not need to be designated osteopathic resident slots. But even if you choose to make all of your slots that way, you have the opportunity to have a onboarding pathway for those interested medical students and residents.
Yeah, and a way that we do that, we were talking about our tips for like partnering with other programs is, here in Cleveland, Ohio, we have an awesome partnership with our South Bend colleagues, where Dr. Beverly Waters is, but also where OUHCOM is. And so, if I know there's people from all over the country on the webinar here, you should reach out and see what other resources are available through the comms, because, OUHCOM offers an onboarding course for new residents, and we send all of our residents, and boom, all of a sudden we met one of our requirements for onboarding residents into the OR program. And that takes no effort on my part, which I especially enjoy the most, but they get to do a full crash course weekend at OUHCOM. And then we've actually have students that I know they have students from all over the country do it. But if you start looking around, you might find that schools in your area, or state societies especially, they offer types of kind of training classes, programs, weekend courses, and those will definitely help you fulfill your criteria in a very easy way without you having to worry about actually planning something yourself. You just got to worry about getting them there.
Yeah, and I think with that, it's just that trying to think of this as an easier entry level, right? So you need a DOE, one osteopathic faculty. That's 2 people and 1 resident per class year. And that's it. That's your entry level. So it doesn't need to be in your entire program. It doesn't need to be all of your faculty, but there's definitely a way to get your program, steps towards receiving osteopathic recognition.
Thank you. Some of you have already mentioned it, but some of the studies have shown recently that some of the top barriers are the continued osteopathic recognition requirements by the ACGME, and they've been evolving and changing. Lack of funding to support that, and osteopathic evaluation requirements, lack of support from your colleagues, and insufficient time for OPP training in addition to normal residency schedule have been the things that have been reported as those top barriers. How have each of you kind of hurdled that, or do you have an example of how you've addressed one of those top barriers?
So for us, like I said, our education has been evolving. For a long time, we would have conference in the afternoon, but then, the residents came and they said, this is quite intrusive, because then, we then have to run and we have to do sign out, and we have to do discharges and whatnot. So this year, we've actually incorporated our osteopathic conference into the regular noon conference time. So now, and the resident, the goal would be to speak for about 15-20 minutes, kind of about techniques, the mechanics behind the techniques, how you would use the techniques. And we're lucky to have a very supportive institution, and they bought us a bunch of tables. So we break out that we have the tables all set up. So now there's part of your scholarly activity, but you're also now mentoring medical students, and both MDs and DOs, by teaching the MDs and the DO students how to do these techniques on each other. In addition, all the MD residents, who are on service go. So we're looking for, a kind of as a way to open for referrals for any kind of OMT, but also, some of them have actually expressed interest in learning more. And then this year, actually last year, what we started was what we called Osteopathic Principles in Practice with OMT Bedside Rounds. So twice a month, the residents who are only on a floor rotation. That way, if you're on an elective, if you're on nights, or if you're in the ICU, you don't have to go. But we'll go to the bedside. We'll talk about the patient beforehand, and we'll start to discuss and actually perform some OMT. Then we'll go back to the EMR, and then we show them how to write the note, and then we discuss why about the billing associated with the note, and why it has to be written a certain way. Why you have to write the number of regions, and then explain everything that has to do with, when it comes to the billing, that you have to add the modifier, or the billers have to add the modifier. But it kind of takes, everything that they've learned and actually literally applies it to the bedside. And we've had some, we're kind of evolving that even more this year, for the upcoming academic year, and we've gotten actually a pretty good feedback on it, because they're saying, hey, I actually now can really see how to use this on certain patients. And doing it on a hospital bed is a lot different than doing it on an OMT table. And we brought him into the ICU to do it on a vented patient, which brings in an even different challenge, because when you're doing muscle energy, the patient's not going to do it with you, so you have to learn how to do it with the ventilator. And so those things have really we've really gotten good feedback from that. So that's how we incorporated the OMT and the OPP.
Thank you. Any other thoughts from the other panelists on how you've had to overcome some of those barriers?
I think emphasizing what Dr. Beverly Waters said earlier about, I think faculty is a big concern, having the right amount of faculty, but you could even have, like when I first joined in the program here, I was just part-time faculty at the residency. So if you feel like if you're a DO and you wanted to incorporate OMT more into the program, by applying for OR, you could have part-time faculty who help out with this curriculum in particular, and they'd be listed as one of your osteopathic faculty. And eventually, kind of like maybe some of our programs are, there's been several years of people who have graduated, and we even have MDs listed as our osteopathic faculty because they went through our program that had OR, and so we were able to tap them and saying, they might not be, specifically trained experts like DOs are, but they definitely know quite a bit and they really do help out with our lectures. And so there's a lot of ways of getting around it to really fulfill those requirements.
And I would say, kind of with that, we talked about, one of the other requirements being that you need osteopathic faculty development and scholarly activity for both residents and faculty. So trying to figure out a way, even though it's cliche, one of my mottos is work smarter, not harder. So how can you accomplish those objectives? And within that, so as I shared earlier, I'm a shared DOE amongst 4 programs. So since I've got control over 4 programs, I wanted to think about how I could optimize that particular requirement for each of those. And so one of the things that we've done at our institution is actually have a osteopathic grand rounds that is quarterly, and it's led by each of the different programs. So a faculty member and a resident partner together to do the presentation. And that's a grand rounds counts for the scholarly activity and faculty development if faculty attend the session. So that way we have 4 faculty development opportunities offered throughout the year, as well as then that additional scholarly activity opportunity. And then I would say kind of the other piece that is difficult is evaluations, and we've touched on this briefly. And just to give you a little bit more background on myself, I've been a DOE for approximately 2 years. And when I came in to this role, all of our programs had citations and 2 of them were destined for a site visit. So I came in with kind of a large volume of work to kind of overhaul. And the majority of those citations come down to evaluations. I use the toolbox, I used our local resources, all to kind of figure out how to formulate our own evaluations. And I'm happy to offer our toolkit as well for any of the participants that are interested for our evaluations, if you'd like to take a look at what our programs do. I'm unique in that I also have some subspecialty programs that are osteopathically recognized. So I have anesthesia, general surgery, orthopedics, and internal medicine. So if any of you have the subspecialty programs and aren't sure how to incorporate it, I'm happy to connect with you, offline.
All right, thank you. So I have some additional questions, but please just jump in and share what you'd like. Can you talk about how you went about gaining institutional support for osteopathic recognition? Maybe talking a little bit about if you were originally an AOA program and how you went through that transition, or did you start from scratch and had to seek support for osteopathic recognition? Maybe how you convinced leadership to support that.
I don't know if I sound like a broken record player here. Our program was duly accredited before the single accreditation system, and we ended up being one of the first programs. This is before my time. Dr. Snyder always brags about being one of the first programs with OR because she's very type A like that. But it was easy to, like I said, it was very easy to justify because our administration over time has come to understand how people want to come to programs with OR, and they know that the pipelines that they create through our residency to support a strong primary care workforce for the Cleveland Clinic system is worth it in the end. And so we keep making that case that OR will grow our residency and the quality and help us get more possibly local residents who are from the area who want to stay around and work in the Cleveland Clinic system after. And it's been, now that they've seen the benefits of it, they're very fully supportive of that.
Any other feedback from any of the other panelists, or an example you'd like to use of how you gain institutional support for osteopathic recognition? Okay, I'll move on to the next one. How do you gain resident support for osteopathic recognition? And that kind of goes along the lines with the next question. It's a little bit of an overlap, I think, in my my eyes, and I'll just share as a DIO for an institution, we have a mix of DOs and MDs. Some are seeking, some aren't. Even a lot of our MDs see the benefit with that. However, residents, just like institutional support, they don't want to do the extra administrative type of work, right? So we are at the forefront of convincing them that you're already doing it in practice. Let us worry about the administrative piece, right? It's just a few more questions on the evaluations to make sure you hit those osteopathic recognition questions to meet the ACGME requirements. But a lot of them that went through the single accreditation, you know, with all the initial citations and things that they're still trying to get past that, and they're kind of afraid. But that goes along the lines of, if they're not already an osteopathic recognized or have that identity as a program, how would they go about documenting it to gain osteopathic recognition with the ACGME?
Yeah, I think for me, the best way is to develop a curriculum that's really specialty specific, to show the value to both MD or DO residents. So, you know, we have curriculum specifically for anesthesia and orthopedics, and obviously their objectives are going to be totally different. And I think when they see how they can integrate it into their practice, that makes a world of difference to kind of getting that buy-in from all parties.
I would say starting, right at the get-go with orientation when they're coming in, or actually not even there, go back starting during interview season, promoting how you incorporate osteopathic rec into their education. And kind of like Dr. Lerman was saying earlier, integrating it into the quote, like regular education is really helpful. So we also do our scheduled conference during a time that's regular, like it's didactic time. So, and we have both MDs and DOs all participate, even the ones who are not part of the ones who are not part of OR are kind of auditing, so to speak, the lecture. So I think having that incorporated gives great buy-in. And then we've noticed that as our MDs are so interested in it and our DOs feel like, oh, I do have something that I can teach because my colleagues are coming from not knowing anything. It helps them to get that buy-in when they see other people interested in what they've spent 4 years kind of learning and developing. And then we also integrate on the family medicine side, we integrate our OMT in the outpatient setting just directly into clinic hours, so they don't have to do an extra OMT clinic at our site. It's just part of their regular continuity clinic. So even just today with one of our DOs, she had someone with a viral URI. She was talking about all the supportive care, and she had a med student from PCOM there. And I said, is there anything else you could do? Could you DO anything for this patient? And they're like, oh, we could do OMT. So, making sure that you're integrating it into their regular day really helps with their buy-in as well.
What we've also done, I think is, and I think it's important to get your non-MD faculty to even ask the DOs, hey, is there anything you can potentially add? What do you think? Is there any role for OMT in this? And then, we invite all of the MD faculty to our DO faculty development. That way, when it also comes to doing, the evaluations, which I think is probably one of the harder things to do, especially if you have, we have a very limited DO faculty in our institution, and the MDs would be like, well, I don't know what to look for. I don't know how to evaluate this. So we've been incorporating them into all the DO faculty development. And so, I've had several faculty come to me and say, hey, I got excited because one of the DO residents, I asked them about OMT and they did it. So.
I totally agree. I think some of our MD faculty probably promote OMT more than some of the DO faculty do. I mean, because they've been here and they just see the benefits and they love doing it. So I agree. And I think, something that really has helped with our buy-in, when it comes to building our like curriculum, like who's actually doing the lectures, it's actually our senior residents who are doing the osteopathic lectures. So although I'm coordinating our curriculum here, I probably only do 2 or 3 lectures a year because the residents are then doing the rest of them. And so when the interns come in at the start of the year and the second and third years are teaching OMT lectures, they're excited because they're like, wow, this is someone who's just a year or two older than me. And they've been obviously doing it to the point where they can now teach it. And now it becomes like the residents are encouraging each other to do it because they're the ones who are actually teaching each other. As us as the faculty, we're doing a lot of the behind the scenes work and documenting, but the residents are teaching each other, and that has really helped with a lot of buy-in.
Thank you. Kind of going into next question, Dr. Corey Beverly Waters, I want to point this and direct this towards you because you did mention that you serve as the Director of Osteopathic Education for more than one program. How did you go about combining the resources with the multiple programs? Other than the didactics, do you have some other examples or ways of how you tried to coordinate that?
Yeah, so I would say if you're looking to try to either start this at an institution from the beginning and looking to try to get buy-in from multiple programs, we actually have an additional program manager for osteopathic recognition. She is shared with our ONMM3 residency. That's obviously a smaller residency. We can take up to 3 residents per year, so she does have some extra time to assist with the consistency of the requirements amongst all the programs. So I think really having that administrative dyad can be super helpful to, make sure you're meeting those requirements because there are the semi-annuals and the final evaluations that need done by the DOE and the program director. And especially if you have multiple programs, like we have 53 residents, and I need to meet with all 53 residents every 6 months. There's a lot of moving pieces, but it is possible. I meet them during their didactic period. The orthopedic residents, I'm meeting at 6 a.m. It's not for everybody, but it is possible to get that done. 4 programs definitely is a challenge, but let's say there are 2 programs that are interested in osteopathic recognition. I think it's definitely doable. But I think having that strong administrative assistance is really key to making that function well.
Any other thoughts on that question on how to combine resources for multiple programs from any of the other panelists?
And I guess the other thing I could add too is actually the evaluations are all the same virtually, right? So the same thing we're talking about, not recreating the wheel. Their didactic sessions, although curriculum specific to their residency, it's all the same evaluations. The osteopathic recognition required questions are actually integrated into their rotations that they have either an osteopathic faculty member or it's appropriate. So we utilize MedHub for our evaluation forms, and I'm sure any evaluation form resource would be able to use similarly, that you can click if you're, are capable basically of evaluating a resident on their OPP/OMT education, and it pulls up those additional questions to meet those milestones. So that's a way that it's the same evaluation form that you've been using. That doesn't change. You just have basically a click box, and that additional questions open up for those preceptors or faculty that are qualified to evaluate the resident in those areas.
Thank you. The next one revolves around how you've utilized College of Osteopathic Medicine resources to support OR. Since I'm with the College of Osteopathic Medicine, utilizing our OMM team, we have a full slate of faculty for the medical students at the UME level, and them doing some of the didactics and chiming in, and then residents leading some of those as well that are senior level. And that's how we've utilized the resources. What about some of the panelists? How are you partnering with some comms and utilizing some of their resources?
Well, as I said before, we have a pretty good relationship with OUHCOM just because we're located pretty close to the Cleveland campus. And so they, exactly like you said, I mean, they have a full OMM faculty there. And so they started doing the OMM for all course every September, right when the residents are starting. And now that's kind of happening at all of the OUHCOM campuses across Ohio. And I think lots of residency programs are sending their people there. So it's really good kind of cross sharing where those faculty get they get credit for doing the extra work, putting it in their their clinical duties there, and it definitely helps us out a lot.
Okay. Great. Well, I'm going to move on to some of the questions that were submitted online by the registrants. And the first one we talked about a little bit. I'm just going to reiterate it and see if you have anything to add. How are you regularly integrating OPP training into your didactics? So I know Dr. Beverly Waters talked about it a few times. Any of the other panelists want to talk about it?
Sure. So we have a quarterly grand round, similar to Dr. Beverly Waters, where we're combined with another residency program. And so we have residents and faculty co-present. It is during our Wednesday afternoon block session that we have for our FM residents. So it's not an addition, it's in replacement of or right there. We also regularly have OMM inpatient rounds that occur also at the end of our didactic session. So for people who aren't part of OR, they can use that as study time, and people who are part of OR or people who want to come to our inpatient rounds will come to that. And that occurs essentially about once a month that we do our inpatient rounds. So that's how our kind of regular set things that we do. And then for our outpatient OMT clinic, like I said, that's just integrated into regular clinic. So we're integrating that OPP in anytime patients are being presented to us. And then for our IM, on the IM side, IM is required to do a certain number of outpatient sessions at the outpatient clinic. And one of those they do with one of our faculty who does only OMT hours. So it gets integrated that way that they get to do their outpatient hours. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we do.
Thank you. Dr. Lerman.
So we have our monthly osteopathic conference, and we have the osteopathic principles and practice with OMT rounds twice a month. Excuse me. And like I said, these things are always evolving. So we're looking to, and we've also asked the faculty, during intern rounds or resident report, can you with a DO, kind of ask them to incorporate, osteopathic principles into the report. So yeah, again, I think it's important to, as we all said, integrate it into, their daily activities. That way, it's not extra work, and they don't feel punished.
Yeah, and kind of giving some specifics on how our program works. So, our didactics are every Wednesday morning for 4 hours. And so 1 hour a month is osteopathically focused. And to be honest, the senior residents do 8 of those, and I do 4 of them. And so it's really not too much work for me, to be honest. And the ones that I lead are the ones that are like more ones to fulfill our osteopathic recognition. So we do journal club once or twice a year. And so I'll do those and usually pull a resident to help me do it. So that meets their scholarly activity requirements for OR. So then I'm kind of double dipping. I'm getting the residents their scholarly activity for OR. And we're also, meeting those requirements. And another session I do is probably one related to, we do like OMM practice questions before the ISE is coming up. And so out of the 12 1-hour lectures that happen a year, I'm only doing 3 or 4 of them, and the residents are really taking it from the rest there. So once you get it going, it's kind of like a well-oiled machine that will just keep itself going, recycling lectures and the residents taking a lot of responsibility there.
Okay, thank you. How long did it take for the osteopathic recognition certification to be approved for each of your programs? From starting the application to actually getting the awarded the accreditation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be honest, when I took over as DOE, it was already there. But you know, with you know, having to get, you know, it was for initial certification and then having to get for final certification, it probably took about 1 to 2 years after that, you know, in order to you know, address the citations.
Yeah, we had 2 programs that had initial recognition with warning required site visits, and then 2 programs that had continued recognition that had a few citations. I will say the thing to keep in mind is that the Osteopathic Recognition Committee itself has I'm not sure if it's 3 times a year or maybe twice a year, but they meet periodically. So even if you submit, and depending on when you submit, and their agenda may close. So even if you submit your application, you think, great, I should be hearing soon, they'll let you know when it's accepted to their agenda, and then you'll hear after that. So it could be, you know, anywhere from 3 months, 6 months to a year, kind of through that initial process, depending on where your application can fall in relationship to their meetings.
Yeah, and on the ACGME website, the osteopathic recognition site, it will list the dates for the next agenda and when that closes. So for us, knowing I had a deadline, I submitted very close to the deadline. And so I had a quicker turnaround time for when we got our results back.
And correct me if I'm wrong, they actually don't require a site visit for that, correct? It's at the 2-year mark. I think they do the next programs accreditation visit. That's when they evaluate the osteopathic recognition as well. I know it's changed a couple of times and I'm not as familiar with it. Does anybody have any feedback on that for those listening?
Yes, it has changed. It changed from 20, so the separate applications that I did in 2015, 2018, and 20, what year are we, 2024, it was all different every time. And with your initial application submission, you do not have a site visit, but you will then get a site visit within 2 years of submitting your application.
All right, thank you. How many ACGME programs have you successfully helped achieve osteopathic recognition? That was one of our questions. And I guess you can count the ones that might have already had it when you came in, Dr. Lorman. Take the credit. Okay, all right. All right. In terms of keeping continued osteopathic recognition, what are the biggest citations or issues you've experienced?
I mean, wording. You know, I mean, you know, I have the forms, I have this, I have that, but it doesn't have the wording that they have. So go to the FAQs, and that's why it was mentioned, I believe, by, you know, Dr. Beverly Waters and by Dr. Vitucci, you know, to use the FAQs, and they literally tell you just copy paste it, because that's what they want. And you know, anytime they have a new iteration of the FAQs, probably going to be a new iteration of verbiage. And so just go to that. And, you know, once I made that change, a lot of the citations were, you know, resolved.
From a DIO perspective, I'd like to add in here to kind of piggyback on Dr. Lerman about the language, you know, writing many applications in response to citations, and plenty of site visitors have told me that they do like a word search or a word find when they review applications. So yes, cutting and pasting or getting familiar with that terminology with ACGME, because I guarantee that you probably don't think it's a citation. You just didn't write it to where it explained it to them in the way they understand it. So I tell all my program directors that if it's a citation, and don't get upset about it because they're like, I don't know why I got cited for that. Or it might have not even been a question on the application. So they're like, well, how did they cite me? How did they know that? So you have to dive in deep with any paperwork you have to fill out and just make sure you look at every single requirement and look at that language, the FAQs, and see how it's incorporated into your application or your evaluations or your documents. Anybody have some more to add to that? Thinking of that?
Yeah, I could just add a little bit of detail on one of the citations we had received for our site visit that we had for internal medicine. Is one of the ACGME requirements is that your program requires both faculty development in two areas. It needs to be OPP, OMT, and evaluation and assessment. And so when we were filling out our form for the site visit, we had included one or the other for each of the faculty members, but didn't necessarily have both for each of the faculty members, and we're cited on that. And the way it is written, and it doesn't necessarily kind of delineate it quite as clearly as that. So those are kind of the pieces where you may kind of get tripped up in that process. So make sure you kind of read through some of those pieces with a fine-tooth comb.
And I was very lucky when I started. I took over a well-oiled machine, and so luckily I haven't had to deal with any citations. But what's been really helpful has been going to the osteopathic full course day at the ACGME conference and actually just meeting the OR staff that's part of ACGME, because you can reach out to them anytime with questions. They're very nice. And if you go to that day, at the ACGME meeting, there's a full day of osteopathic stuff beforehand. You get to meet them in person and talk to them and ask questions, and that's just a really good way to just flat out ask them what your questions are, or why you might have received something, or how you can meet a certain standard. In addition to that, and I just echoing the FAQs they write are really good. They really spell it out pretty clearly. So that's a very guiding document for us when we're documenting new things.
Thank you. One last question before I just go to the ACOM staff that's on here with us, see if they have any questions before we wrap this up. What would a step-by-step process for successful implementation of osteopathic recognition look like? If you had to briefly just state the 5 steps of what it would look like for those that are listening. Or 10, let's say 10 steps.
I don't have any experience there. My suggestion to people is just start writing stuff down that you're doing, because you're probably doing a whole lot of it already. You're probably meeting a whole lot of requirements without even realizing it if you're even just incorporating some basic OMM stuff into your residency. So start writing it down, and then you can start seeing how that falls into the different templates that Dr. Lerman mentioned through ACOFP or ACOI, and you'll be surprised how you can fill those templates with things you're already doing.
Well, for those listening, I would like to mention that there is a great resource on the AOGME website, ACOFP, Osteopathic Recognition Toolkit resource, and then also definitely the ACGME website. It's all there for you, or just reaching out to program directors or DIOs at other institutions that already have it. Everybody's willing to share, and we need to utilize those resources. So I see we don't have any live Q&A questions right now, but I would remind those listening that if you do, please pop them in there and we will keep those if we don't get to them, and we will answer those later. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists for this great discussion. And to all who have joined us, we might get a few minutes back, but please contact us directly at aogme@acom.org. And this will conclude the webinar. Thank you again to everyone who's joined us, and have a great rest of your day.